G'day, everyone. I think we're now live. Sorry, a few minutes late. This is TRH, the Reconnection Now by Mr. Perfect. Didn't do one last week because I was actually away on holiday, so apologies, but it was a great break. I'm Terry, founder and CEO of Mr. Perfect. As most of you will know, what is Mr. Perfect? Well, traditionally, we bring men together at barbecues to create communities and connection for the betterment of their mental health and to reduce isolation. What is TRH, the Reconnection Hour? Well, we normally chat to health professionals, doctors, psychologists, counselors, you name it, and other people doing incredible things in the world of connection, men's health, and mental health. Normally, I give a little bit of a disclaimer or a warning, I guess, a trigger warning. We will discuss mental health naturally. It's not normally that gory or goes into too much detail, but just in case it does, just be wary. We may discuss some hairy topics about mental health. So my week, how's it been? Well, I mentioned I had a great break. It's far from perfect though, because I didn't advertise this properly this week to speak with Joel. And I put it down to, I was just telling him offline, I was actually really relaxed this week and had an excellent break on the farm with my two boys and my wife, which was incredible. Really relaxed. So yeah, it was brilliant. And it was one of my first holidays in a long time where I've actually felt that way and my anxiety wasn't playing up too much. So that was good. What's happening with Mr. Perfect? Well, we've got new barbecue hosts wanting to get involved all over the country, which is so cool. I've got a ton. I think I've got like 20 at the moment in the process of becoming a host. Obviously won't all become one overnight due to COVID, but it's really good to see that there's people out there wanting to help and support more men. We've got an event this weekend at DY near me on the northern beaches of Sydney with a friend of mine and a guy who runs Mongrels Men, which is a similar organisation to us, but bringing men together at fitness events, running, sport, absolute legend, Tim. So we're going to be down there early from about 6:30 at DY Beach. A little bit of a yoga session and a barbecue, which would be great. Other things that have been going on today, well, obviously it's today is Are You OK Day. As everyone's probably aware, you would have seen all the yellow branding around on social media. I saw a lot of stuff going on LinkedIn today around people posting about Are You OK Day and what it means, and a lot of mental health professionals posting about it as well. And one such guy that actually I think we met on LinkedIn is the person I'm speaking to tonight. Absolute legend. He is a psychologist himself. His name is Joel Curtis. I believe we met on LinkedIn and then went for a coffee a couple of years back. And ever since, he's always been a great support from afar and vice versa of what we do. So I will bring in Joel now. Good evening, Joel.
Hey, Terry. How are you, mate?
Very well. How are you?
Yeah, going very well. Thank you, mate. I appreciate you having me on the show tonight. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
No, I really appreciate it, mate. You were someone it was on my hit list for a while. So I finally got around to asking you. Was I right? Did we meet on LinkedIn? Did we connect on LinkedIn?
We did.
That was it.
Yeah, then we had a coffee in Double Bay when I used to have a practice in Double Bay. We caught up for coffee in Double Bay. So I think that was in the early days of Mr. Perfect, mate. I think that's probably going back 2 or 3 at least, I reckon.
Yeah, I reckon. I said 2. I actually think it's 3 years, which is incredible. Yeah. And at the time, I think I was having, coffees with people like yourself and people in, mental health, I guess, and discussing what we were up to and what we were trying to do. And wow, I think at the time we probably only had a few barbecues running. So it's it's cool. It's cool that it's come full circle. And obviously you're a psychologist. I mentioned that you run your own practice, but how about you tell everyone, a little bit about you, I guess, more about maybe a bit of personal stuff about yourself, how you and how you got into psychology.
Yeah, good. No, I appreciate that, Terry. Myself, I'm a father of 2. I've got older kids. I've got a 19-year-old and 18-year-old. So gone through the whole the grind of starting a business with kids that were much younger back in the day. So I've been in my own practice now for about 11 years. So I can relate to all those dads out there that are trying to run their own business or working in that corporate space with younger kids. So I've got that as a background. I'm actually a sports psychologist is my background. I've got a master's in sports psych. So similar to yourself, mate, I know you're an avid football player and coach and fan. So
Yes.
I played a lot of sport as a kid, and sports psychology was something that I sort of got into later in my life. I always been passionate about sport, but I'm not sure about you, mate, but my sporting skills have never been that great. So could never make it as an athlete, but always thought my skill set was in supporting, helping. I love that team environment and being part of a team. So got into sports psychology down at uni Canberra when I was 20, turning 22. So I was 21 when I started uni.
Yeah.
So worked for a few years after finishing high school, bummed around, did a few things here and there, warehouse jobs, nothing exciting, and then went back to TAFE, did my HSC again when I was 21, and then was fortunate enough to get an ATAR that I needed to get me into uni down in Canberra. So I spent 3 years down in Canberra doing undergrad.
Amazing.
So, yeah, had a great time in Canberra. We could tell some stories about uni, but yeah, had a great time there. And in that terms of connecting with men, I've got two of my best mates I met my first day at uni on campus in Canberra, so we're still friends to this day. So that was 20 odd years ago. So
and the degree
yeah.
was that psychology at the time? So you always knew from that point you were going into that?
Yeah, undergrad in psychology. The reason I went to Canberra was because they had a couple of sports psychology subjects. It was one of the only unis that sort of tied in a little bit of sports psych. So yeah, did my undergrad there, finished, and then I'm born and bred in Sydney, so I came back to Sydney, did a postgrad and then a master's at Uni Western Sydney in sports psychology. So my drive and my passion was always to get into sports psychology, and it's something that I do a little bit on the side, but at the moment, predominantly my work's in general psychology. So have a general practice, depression, anxiety, particularly working with men. I'm like yourself, passionate about men's mental health. So got into general psychology by default, and I've obviously used a lot of my coaching and sports psychology skills when I'm working with clients in the clinical space. So enjoying that, which is good.
Amazing. And how did you, or I guess why did you start up your own practice? Because I've heard it's bloody stressful. And what drove you to do that?
That's a good question. I started my life working for Centrelink as a psychologist back in the day. So that was my first professional job after I graduated, and had, as I said, had zero interest in clinical psych at that stage. But then having worked in that space for several years, enjoyed working with clients, working with people, in lower socioeconomic situations, and, did that for 4 or 5 years, but sort of got to a point where I thought, no, I'm not really sure this whole clinical thing's for me. I want to try and get into the corporate space. So got into corporate psychology, working again in mental health, but working in a smaller corporate, developing business. It's like working with corporates and that sort of stuff, and got a bit frazzled by some of the treatment and some of the way things were being done. So I thought, okay, if I don't like it, I should put up or shut up. So I thought, okay, well, I might as well give my own business a try. So can't say I've had heaps of experience in running my own business, but just knew I was passionate enough to want to start something and be able to sort of run it, the way I would like to. And then I've been fortunate enough to be doing that for the last 11 years, have other psychologists who work for me, and I'm very passionate now about recruiting and supporting and helping psychologists become more effective with their clients. And that's something that I really enjoy outside of just working with people on a day-to-day basis.
Amazing. And you said you had the interest in obviously sports psychology. That was kind of like your first love with it, I guess. Is there any major differences, or is the things you see in that space similar to what you see in general, or what you saw in the Centrelink world? What's the thing that links them all, or are they vastly different?
Oh no, look, to be frank, there's some differences. You're talking about elite athletes versus people that are obviously struggling in terms of work and those sort of things. So in terms of that sense, there's differences, but in terms of people's presentations, mental health is mental health, whether that's something that you struggle with in terms of not being able to find work, or you're struggling with in terms of being an elite athlete under pressure to perform. There are a lot of similarities in terms of people's ability to be able to get on top of things quickly. Clearly, someone that's in an elite athlete space is probably more inclined to want to, or be able to get on top of things more quickly. Whereas if you're working in a general psychology space, that Centrelink space, people are probably at a lower point and probably need a little bit more building up. But I find that really great coaching skills and the positive psychology work that sports psychologists do, if you use it the right way, can certainly help with people in more difficult situations in terms of, needing support for income-wise or job-wise. But like you say, that those things are certainly very transferable when you're working with elite athletes that might just need a bit of an adjustment. But in terms of the off-field issues, very similar. There's a lot of professional athletes that struggle with all sorts of mental health issues. So in terms of that, very similar. But obviously in terms of abilities to manage things, probably at the elite level, sometimes they're a little bit more quicker to be able to, embrace concepts and take things on because they're a little bit more used to that side of things.
And I guess nowadays, but we've come a long way regardless, probably in the last 10 years, of people accessing help, or at least putting their hand up and saying, I need help. And it's become, this kind of, we talk about this word stigma. I think we've moved past that mainly. But in the sports world, you were obviously doing it a while, when you first got into it a while ago. Was there a noticeable reluctance for people to reach out to you, or were they kind of like forced to by the manager or the coach or the team? Were they told you must go and see Joel, or were they sort of did they come with their own free will?
It's a great question, Terry. And to be absolutely frank, over the course of 20 years, to be honest, I don't think much has changed in that regard in terms of stigma around sports psychology and mental health. It's still, athletes are probably a unique population in themselves, but to admit there's a weakness, to admit that as an elite athlete there's something you can't handle and then reach out for help, it's just as difficult, probably sometimes more difficult for elite athletes than it is for the rest of us blokes in general population, because at least for us there's anonymity which we can sort of hide behind, so no one knows if I'm going to see a psychologist, no one knows or cares who I am. But obviously if an elite athlete rocks into an office, people know who they are, so there's that whole COVID operation in terms of that sort of thing. So mate, it's unfortunately it's not getting much better, which is an absolute shame. So I know you touched on Are You Okay, Dan? I want to keen to chat to you about that, but that's why things like today are extremely important, to get that messaging out there. And elite athletes sometimes don't do themselves many favors, unfortunately.
And what was the most sort of common presentations you'd have from elite athletes?
It can be more around the performance issues, particularly if you're under pressure in terms of contracts or social media these days. I mean, I'm an avid Cronulla supporter in terms of NRL, and obviously I don't know if many people knew about Chad Townsend getting sent off, and he was talking about the heat that he's copped on social media for what he's done, you know what I mean? So that's one of those pressures and stresses, trying to deal with that. Front page of newspapers and online news stories and all those sort of things. So that's what they're dealing with. Coaching selections, every supporter, myself included, have got opinions about who should be doing what and what they're not doing. So there's all those things that you just don't understand as a elite athlete. You get into it because you've got a skill set, but then you've got to deal with all the things that go along with it. And, obviously with it, you'd understand that from the English Premier League, mate. Those guys are probably 400 times more intense than what it is here in sport. So it's everywhere across the world, unfortunately. It's a common issue.
And how would you deal with that scenario? What's the kind of advice to them to deal with that? Because it must be the pressure of just doing something wrong in front of X amount of people and then seeing something. So let's say they got something said about them on social media. How do you advise them just not look at any of that, or how do you do it?
I strongly advise, any elite athlete, anyone in a public space, to stay off social media. I mean, obviously, no, we're talking through social media tonight, but you know what I mean? Like, it's horrendous. It's a horrendous place to be. So I do advocate that. Or if some athletes use that to build up their profile. So it's a double-edged sword, because you certainly can get plenty of opportunities from having a social media profile, but it's not without its risk, Terry. So I'm very conscious about talking to people in terms of being more wary of social media, more so the comments. If you want to put some stuff up, but don't read the comment section. That's always my advice to athletes. If you're putting things up, just stay away from the comments.
And I think I mentioned, I didn't read it out, your bio. I was about to read your bio at the start, and I let you kind of describe, but you mentioned in your bio, which I thought was really cool, which I saw on your website, you enjoy listening to people and you're passionate about helping others. Your counselling style is non-directive, so you don't like telling people what you think they should do. and your goal is to help them understand themselves so they have the skills to be able to help themselves. So I was going to ask you, what is your style like of counselling? How does that actually work in practice? Not telling someone what to do, because they come to you thinking you're going to tell them what to do. So
look, in a roundabout sort of way, I do end up sort of guiding strongly, let's just say. But I'm not big on, and particularly for us blokes, because I mean, you can appreciate yourself when you're talking to someone and you're talking about, what's happening in your world as a bloke. Last thing you want is some random person who doesn't really know you that well saying, right, you must, you should, you have to. That's not how I work. I'm more on trying to tailor and modify my approach to fit the person in front of me. And I'm very aware when it comes to blokes that coming in to see a psychologist has already got stigma attached to it, let alone thinking someone's going to judge you or think that you're not doing something right. Even though us blokes know we're struggling, we still don't necessarily like or appreciate people doing that directly. So we've got to be a bit subtle. So yes, of course, I'm big on trying to strongly encourage people, but I'm not that sort of person that sits in a big chair and pretends that I've got all the answers to everyone's problems, and somehow the gospel according to Joel is how you should live your life. It's more about trying to work in with people, understand background, history, and then see if we can't tailor some approaches to fit them and what they need, because I'm very conscious unless people feel comfortable that they can apply what we're talking about as a bloke, you're just not going to do it. So that's my sort of style in that sense, Terry.
Yeah. And I guess my next question is going to be, what's your general experience then of men? Like what do you see most often, I guess now and maybe let's say 10 years ago? Is it similar? What the sort of presentations you see now? What's the main reasons?
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of over the last decade, not much has changed, obviously, in terms of financial pressures, stress. I don't want to keep bagging out corporate life, but guys in corporate space feeling like they're, it's a velvet line trap because you're getting good money, but you've got to show up, and they get their pound of flesh. And, obviously then you're under pressure, particularly I live down south of Southern Shire, so it's all about, the appearance and it doesn't necessarily matter about the substance. So you've got to make sure you keep up that appearance, and the mortgages and the cars and the toys and those sort of things can certainly cause a lot of pressure and stress on blokes, which then can have impacts on relationships, then can have further complications, drugs, alcohol. So in terms of the last 10 years, Terry, unfortunately, not much has changed in terms of presentation. What I'm finding right now is because of the whole COVID situation, people working from home, we're certainly seeing an influx of people experiencing more acute and heightened senses of mental health. It tends to be, instead of it being a slow burn, it's almost an instant overnight thing. Yesterday I was fine, but now I've just, lockdowns killed me, working from home's killed me, not being able to even just physically interact with people's killing me. I can't go to the pub, I can't exercise. There's just this whole myriad of things that is causing this more acute and almost instant state of mental health distress.
And how do you find that on yourself? Because I get, knowing like a lot of mental health professionals through my day job, through the work with the charity, through other means, and friends and everything, I've certainly noticed a trend in doctors, mental health professionals, you name it, saying to me, whoa, like they might not say it publicly or to people around them or their peers, because that's the perfection thing, right? They're trying to solve other people's problems or help them.
Exactly
but
right.
But they have said, like, you can tell the weight of some of the things that get presented to them can become a really big burden. So how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with the burden that comes?
Yeah. Look, again, that's another great question, Terry. And I'd be surprised if there's not one single, emergency service worker, mental health support, psychologist, doctor that's not feeling under the pump at the moment. And you're right, we probably don't say it publicly because we don't want to cause people that come in to see us for help to be concerned about, us in a sense. We want to make sure they feel comfortable that the person they're talking to is at least pretending to be okay and can help them, guide them around. But everyone's under the pump. It's horrendous for everyone for different reasons. But we're not immune to that. In terms of myself, over the course of 20 odd years of doing this, I think for me, I'm like yourself, I'm very passionate about mental health, and I'm very passionate about working with people. So I make sure that I feel that in each session I'm giving people my absolute all, in terms of not leaving anything on the table. Sometimes that gets me in trouble because I can overstep or overreach. So I'm forever apologising and, sort of explaining what I'm doing, but I do that for my own reasons as well. So that when I go home at night, I go, okay, I didn't leave anything on the table. I said what I need to say to that person. That person's under no illusions that this is better than that way. So at least that helps me sleep better at night, Terry. So it may come across sometimes a little bit too much. I think it's a bit, I think a lot of people resonate with it, but I also think a lot of people can be a bit off put by it. So I've got to be conscious of timing. But for me, for my own health, that's what I try and do. So I can shut the door and go, right, I didn't leave anything out and say, oh, I should have said this to that person, or I'm wondering what happens if I could have or would have or should have. I want to make sure, at least in my heart, I feel like I've said what I need to say, Terry. That sort of gives me a little bit of comfort that I can go home and concentrate on with my family and do the things I need to do to keep myself up and about.
No, I love it. I love the way you put that. That's so, because I think in my job, like it's not and my boss knows it. He's also one of my best friends. It's not like my passion. I don't put everything on. I can't put everything into it all the time. And then that kind of causes things. I like it and I like dealing with healthcare, but the actual mechanics of the job sometimes, I do feel like I haven't given my all at times, or I haven't really left, and the way you just put that, it's excellent, because I know from my psychologist, he does exactly that. And I never expected that because of I didn't have many experiences with counselors before, but I'd seen a psychiatrist and I'd seen, I think once, maybe seen a counselor way back when, and I don't even know if they were officially qualified, let's put it that way, a long, long, long time ago in my 20s. And my GP's great talker, but my psychologist just, like, not bluntness, but in a way that was delivered direct, clear, kind of some accountability as well, and back on me. And when he first did it, I was like, whoa, first couple of sessions, I don't know, no one's ever spoke to me like in that terms about mental health. It was all very softly. And then they didn't really know how to get to that next stage. And he got me thinking. So he was never telling me what to do ever, and he still doesn't. But he got me thinking about things so much and the mechanics of it, and asked all the right questions that, he would never leave anything on the table. Like, he would get it out there. And I appreciate that so much now. I never thought I would, but I appreciate that so much, because it took a long time to get through to me, like to see changes happen. But when it did, the acceleration of improvement was incredible. So, and sometimes I know that approach. I think I wasn't even educated on what to expect. So I was very lucky that I found a good one fairly quick. I say good one for me fairly quickly. I've got friends and colleagues and acquaintances and other people that have said, but I've seen 3 people and they just, they sat back and they've just looked at the clock, or they haven't really engaged, or they haven't, and they just maybe weren't putting everything on the table, or maybe that the person, I just feel like the two-way street of being able to work together, it's hard. It must be really hard to find that connection with every person you're consulting with or you're speaking with. So I was wondering, like, how do you deal with the ones that you can't connect with? Like, what do you do after the first couple of sessions?
Yeah, that's a great question. It sounds like your psychologist and myself will get on famously then.
Yeah, I think you would.
Similar.
You tell it how it is. Yeah.
It's almost like the Gordon Ramsay style of psychology without swearing, like just right.
Well, there's a lot of swearing.
With other blokes, absolutely. Like,
of course. Yeah.
But look, you're right. I don't connect with everyone. My style doesn't resonate with everyone. Look, I know we're being a bit jovial at the moment, but my style is not fit for everyone. And I try to tailor it where I can, and I do my best. I think my skill set is being able to connect with everyone. Maybe not 100%, but enough to at least get people through. And I'm comfortable if people say, "All right, well, look, I think you've done as much as you can do for me," and that's where we sit. I'm always happy to have that conversation with people. I don't ever want it to be because we didn't connect or I didn't try. That's always been my philosophy. Like, I think I'm happy for people to be honest. So in terms of how I connect with people, I will find whatever I can do, whether that's a sporting interest or maybe got connection through we've got similar age kids or similar backgrounds or similar history. So I'll always try and find something I can connect with, and it might even be where I just sort of not tone down, but sort of tone it off for a touch, like maybe I'll hold back the whole brute force sort of approach until I sort of feel like we've got that little bit of connection. And I'm always forever talking to all my psychologists in our team about you've got to earn the right to challenge people. So I never sort of blow people out of the water too early. When I was much younger, I was very guilty of blowing people out of the water, going, right, well, you've just got to, because my coaching sports psychology, right, just do this and do that, and don't look like this, do that, and 3 sessions, you're out the door. But I've mellowed a bit. But, I think if you're earning the right to challenge people and you're earning that rapport and you've got that connection, I genuinely think, like you, Terry, once people sort of sit back with the shock, they're thinking, okay, well, this actually jolted me into thinking a little bit more deeply and intensely. So, yeah, that's great to hear that you found that with your psychologist, Terry. That's fantastic, and genuinely happy that someone else is out there doing similar things, mate. That's great.
Yeah, and I try and dissect that for people sometimes, because they do ask, well, whether it's our community or people, friends or family, whoever, and they say, well, what does he do that makes, what is it for you? And I said, look, I needed that at that point. Like I was in denial of a lot of things, and he challenges me all the time.
Yep.
And he knows that he's not going to see me for a couple of months. I now only see him every couple of months. So he always say this almost all the time. He says, don't come to me like in a crisis mode. Like you need to develop that, build up that resilience and skill set and work on the things we've discussed in between. So it's pointless you just check in every 2 months and coming to me and go, oh, I just had a big night and a blowout again, and I had an argument with my wife and this happened, and then my thoughts were. He said, you've got to take a bit of accountability back. And I'm the most empathetic man in the world when 70% of the time, but there's 30% of me that's quite stubborn and I'll say it how it is. My wife knows that, and my kids know that, and some of my closest mates know that. Definitely a nice guy, but sometimes I try and impart that now. Now I've seen it and I've gone through that process. I try and, without giving too much advice, I just say, look, you've got to work with this person. Like you've got to work with them and meet them at the middle. That's the kind of thing I try and advise, whether they're right for them or not. If not, they've got to keep trying. Like it's not going to happen overnight. For some people it will, some people it won't. But it's interesting to try and find that. I'm always questioning people on that secret sauce, kind of like, what is it? But, which leads me nicely into the next question. With men particularly that you see, what's the stuff that does make them connect, or what do you find works particularly for men to get them to connect, regardless if it's the first session or the 10th? Where have you seen success?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm very structured in terms of when I'm working with men, particularly in a first session, and for me it's about actually normalizing the experience, and I'm very deliberate in terms of helping guys understand that walking down the hallway, opening the door, sitting in the reception area, filling out paperwork, feeling like, what the heck am I doing here? This is not for me. I'm weak. I'm bad. I'm this. I really help identify that to guys when they first set foot in my door. And I actually show my appreciation. So I genuinely and sincerely mean it when I say I really appreciate you coming in tonight or today, because I absolutely get how overwhelming this is. And my first thing is to normalize and calm blokes down, particularly to let them know that I'm not here to judge them. They can feel however they want to feel. If they feel weak, bad, good, or whatever because they're here, that's totally up to them. But that's not what this is about. Because I think the thing that stops most blokes from coming into therapy is that fear of judgment. We're supposed to be big and tough and strong. We're supposed to be able to fix our own problems. And when we can't, as blokes, that's the most devastating thing in the world. So for me, I want to normalise that. I want to make them feel at ease that they can talk openly and honestly with me. And I'm not here to do anything other than work with them, guide them through, and then help them help themselves, Terry. So that's what I think helps guys connect, particularly in a psychology setting. And then I think it's about then just showing them that, vulnerability is okay. Obviously, as you're continuing to work through sessions, it's about that vulnerability piece, because I think for guys, that's the biggest roadblock in terms of seeking help. And Are You Okay Day, I think over the last few years has evolved. And I know you want to talk about that, so I will talk a bit more about that. But yeah, I definitely think that whole feeling judged is the biggest barrier to not only guys connecting, but also guys reaching out for help. So I'm no blokey bloke by any stretch, but I do love hanging out, sporting teams and doing that sort of stuff. But so I'm very passionate about connecting in with people. And so for me personally, I don't find it a challenge to connect in with people, but I do know that a lot of blokes do struggle with that. So I think that for us is about that vulnerability piece, because we don't want to show our rough edges or our flaws or our weaknesses, Terry. So I think that whole vulnerability thing is a thing that stops most guys, but I'm comfortable that once you sort of can get past that and there's some sort of relationship or there's some sort of thing that connects you or binds you, whether that's, as I said, sporting team or schooling or family history, once you can establish that, if you've got that sort of heart that talks about, wanting to connect, I think guys are more inclined to relate to that. And when you get guys, you like yourself with your psychologist, mate, I don't know how long you've been working with him for, but it sounds like a while, you know what I mean? So once a guy connects and feels comfortable, they'll be with you pretty much for as long as they want to be or as long as you need them to be. So that's probably the beauty of working with guys and connecting in well.
Absolutely. And I think that's the way I think about it now. My experience working with the people we do with the charity and, my own journey, friends, you name it, and the more stories I ask about and I ask people about their experiences with men and counselling. Yep. I know from my first experiences, it was the classic, what I did my whole life was like, hold it all in, hold it all in, hold it all in. Yep. And it was like, I wanted to talk, but it just felt like I was holding my breath. And then maybe 2-3 sessions in, I just went, and like it all came out. Yep. And then, the tears, everything like uncontrollable. And the first time I did that, obviously, even though I've done that before in a doctor's appointment when I saw a psychiatrist, same thing happened. It was different with a psychiatrist. It happened, and then we just kind of not glossed over it, but we just kind of went through the motions. With my psychologist, we did that, and it felt like then it was like the build up again. It was from that moment, the trust level and the way he dealt with it and the way we kind of move forward. You're right. Like I can't think of anyone else I would trust with that now. It's been built over time, and I try and tell people this has been 3 years with a psychologist for me. A year seeing psychiatrists and my GP, and like you're trying different things and different pieces together. And it's only now I've got that consistency and that trust that it works. And now when we talk, the conversations are very different. They're a lot more optimistic, and they're a lot more like we've moved past that hurdle. We had to go through it, and we still talk about it, and we still talk about things that might stop or might, we don't get too like celebrating, pat each other on the back, because he says to me, well, now we're here, like you're in this space, what are you going to do the next time like a challenge happens? Like, well, what are you going to do now? Because if you say you're more resilient at this point, like talk me through it. And then we go through it, and it's been amazing to see it get to that point. But I always tell people, and the questions I get, I've got friends who say, I just don't want to talk about my story over and over again and go to a new one. And I'm like, look, you can't just lay it out there in one session and expect, the world the second. It could take years. It could take years of hard work.
Yep, it can.
And I think with and now I was going to ask you, I guess, do you see a common denominator with men that they stick at it, that they don't? Is there a mixture of ones that come for like one session you never see again? What's the general? What's the general experience?
Us blokes are notoriously difficult to work with in practice. Terry, I wish I had the magic. There might be people out there waiting with bated breath for the magic answer. Unfortunately, I don't have one. I get blokes from guys that come for one session, you never see them again. I've worked in couple situations where guys have walked out the door halfway through the first session versus guys that I've worked with for several years. Do you know what I mean? But I'm always conscious that it's never because of anything that wasn't true, and maybe just a timing issue, or they weren't quite ready, or I didn't quite hit the right spot. I back in the day, look, to be honest, back in the day, I used to blame everyone who I saw. I said, they didn't come back because they're just not ready, or they're not this, or they're not that. But as I've gotten a bit older and a bit more wiser, I'm like, well, hang on a second, Joel. There's probably something that you're the common denominator, as you said, situation. So, mate, maybe there's something you're doing that's not quite hitting the spot. So, for me, I'm very conscious that, I don't have the magic wand or the magic pill for the mental health with blokes, but I do understand if you can get guys to first lob in the door, which is obviously at their end. It's not, like you, I'm pretty proactive on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, plenty of things. So I'm doing whatever I can do to promote it, but it's up to them to then take the step to make the phone call, show up to the office, and then it's up to me then to be able to pace it and connect in enough to at least get them back for a second session. Then obviously, as you said, a few sessions in, you can then certainly feel comfortable enough to open up. But I find once you get guys in for 2 or 3 sessions, then you can pretty much rely that they'll come in as consistently as they want to and you need them to. But equally so, that first session can be a little bit hit and miss.
Yeah. And what advice would you give someone, I guess, in our community if they're watching and they've either thought about, they haven't gone to a counsellor yet, a psychologist, or they think they're ready to, or they've been to ones where they haven't had a great experience in their opinion? Like, what's your advice to them?
Yeah.
What things can they be doing like before they come to you? I guess that's
no, I get it, and that's a great question. I think in terms of the psychologist, a little bit funny because we're in that sort of medical space, but we're not really medical practitioners such. And so people come in, and some people call me a doctor. Oh, doctor this, doctor that. I'm not a doctor. I'm a psychologist. You call me Joel. So they sort of come in with that predisposition of, oh, this is a doctor. I can't say anything. You go to a doctor says you've got A, B, C, do X, Y, Z. You go, okay, no problems, all right, whatever. But so what I would say to people is have the courage to talk to whoever you're talking to. Like, don't just judge it off one session. Like, it doesn't matter who it is or how they go about it. Don't judge it off one session. Go back to the second one and say, right, I like this, I didn't like that. I want this, I want that. If you don't tell your psychologist or counsellor, whoever it is, what you need or want, we're not mind readers, contrary to popular belief. We're not mind readers, psychologists. If people don't say it, or they never come back, I'm like, oh, I don't have to guess. Was I offensive? Did I not say enough? Did I say too much? Did I take too many notes? Did I not take enough notes? Did I not give enough homework? So we're sitting there wondering, what the hell happened there? Then someone come back and said, Joel, you did this, you did that. I didn't like this. That was that. I'm like, all right, no problems. Let's do A, B, C. I can, just tell us what's going on so that we can then modify it. If someone's good, they will modify it. If they're not good and they say, look, I'm sorry, that's how I work, I can't help you, then at least you go, all right, sweet. Can you refer me to somebody else? Just have an honest conversation. That would be my advice, Terry.
Yeah, I love it because it reminds me of when I asked someone else that question or a similar question, and they said to me, a psychologist, and they said, yeah, like sometimes a few sessions in, or even, maybe it's longer, they might have to say themselves to the person, like, I can't work with you. And I've actually had the other side of that where people have said to me, like my psychologist told me they can't work with me. And not because they were saying you're offensive or you're whatever, or we're just you're past being fixed. They just were very wary a few sessions in, like, well, you expect this style, or you think this is going to happen. I can't promise you that, or actually you need someone a bit more softly, or a bit more, it's going to be more, I don't know. Or they just realize the condition that they might have or the thing they're dealing with is not particularly going to be their expertise. So they're very, and I think that's great, very honest and great at just going, look, not sure it's going to be great for either of us. What do you think? And talk about it rather than the guessing or just not turning up and cancelling it last minute or whatever.
Exactly right. No, that's fantastic, Terry. And I'm glad to hear people doing that, because that's absolutely what you need to do. If you're on my seat and you think you can't work with someone, just be honest about it. Obviously, you've got to be careful about how you say it, because as you say, you don't want someone to go, condition's untreatable, no one can help me. But you want to say, listen, the way I go about it or what I know about it, unfortunately, I don't think we can. But that's fantastic. It goes both ways, either the psychologist or counsellor telling the client, or the client telling the counsellor or the psychologist. That's perfect. We're in there to have open, honest conversations. It's a safe space, and I want people to feel comfortable that they can do that. So if that's what's happening, fantastic. Either way, I think that's great.
And what suggestions would you give someone about how to find the right psychologist for them? Because I have experiences of, again, anecdotes of, I saw mine at a conference or speaking, and I just thought, I wonder if he's practicing right now, and he was doing a bit, and it took about 6 months before I could get an appointment, and I just kind of did it that way. And I went to my GP and said, I want to see this guy. And he said, I'd rather check him out first. So he did, and then it happened. I've had other people that just go with the person the GP says. I've had others access, something through a helpline or whatever it might be, or a charity. What's your advice to someone who's just unsure about first navigating it and how to go about it, I guess?
Yeah, it's an overwhelming process, because obviously, people will probably first present to their doctor, and that can be overwhelming in itself, because doctors then have to start asking questions, and it can really be very off-putting. So I would say, look, obviously, if you've got a good relationship with your doctor, then that's your first port of call. Otherwise, there's plenty of options. You just people just randomly Google me, and they find us and go, oh, I liked your website or I liked your photo. Sometimes that's what it can be like, okay, if that's that random, all right, well, whatever. Fair enough, obviously, do that. Some people will go ask their friends and their friends will say, oh, I'll go and see this person, that person. So I don't think there's any one way to go about it. I think do whatever works for you. Like if you're more a, research sort of person, then okay, then find several psychologists online, check out the websites, try and see if you can get a bit of a feel for who they are. Some psychology practices like ours have reception staff, so you can ring them and say, oh, I want to speak to Joel, but can you tell me a little bit about his background? How old is he? Does he have kids? What's his style like? And my practice manager's a very awesome and very honest person. She'll say, right, Dave, if you like someone brutal, go and see Joel. If you want someone softer, go and see this person. If you want someone old, see him. If you want someone young, see them. So we're very comfortable that, people have their own reasons for seeing things. They can be genuine things or random things. So just ask questions, Terry. Do your research and don't take anyone's opinion for it, even if it's a GP. I'd still, do your research. But if you do show up, right, or when you do show up, don't just judge it on one session. As I said earlier, I think that's where people can get a little bit. It's as tough as it is for a client to show up for the first time. It's tough for us as psychologists, you know what I mean? Because you're thinking, God, I've got to make sure I say the right things and do the right things because I want to make sure this person comes back. But you know what I mean? So there's all these things going through our head as psychologists in terms of, okay, I want to make sure I don't give them too much, but give them enough to make it think that it's worth their while, but I don't. Do you know what I mean? So as much as clients are on edge, sometimes us as psychologists can be on edge as well. So just cut your psychologist or counselor, come back and have chats.
That's good advice. The patience aspect, and again, I've only learned that through experience, just over time, and other people's stories and experiences. But also the like not expecting the world straight away. I think is just really set that expectation in your own head that look, this may work, this may not. Go with an open mind and ask the right questions as well, and being open and honest. I think that's great advice. And I think you also mentioned about do your own research because you can be referred by someone. I remember telling her this was a bad error on my part, probably about a year into Mr. Perfect, when I was kind of confident that I knew everything about everything, in the mental health space and whatever. And I would give advice too freely. So I don't like the word advice anymore. The premise that you should tell someone what to do, the way you said in your bio, is brilliant. Because people used to ask me, just because they'd seen me involved in this, you must know a good psychologist, good GP, whatever. And I told someone about someone, they went and saw them. It was good at the start, didn't end out that very well afterwards. So now referrals for me are not like I'll give my opinion and I'll say it will come with a disclaimer. It will be this is right, this worked for me, this worked for so and so because I cannot promise this is going to work for you. Please make sure you ask them for a testimony. Do ring them up. Have a chat with them first. Do the research online. Ask the GP. Because I just think it's such a minefield out there. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of support out there for people, but
there is.
It's got to be right for you. So no, I love that. And we were obviously today. We mentioned it is our UK Day, which I somehow almost forgot this morning until I logged onto LinkedIn and saw the yellow posts coming up. What's your experiences of our UK Day? What do you think about it?
Look, initially the concept was obviously has changed a lot in the course of the time it's been running. And to be honest, I had a few reservations about it early on because I thought it was a little bit about just asking questions, but the follow-up was a little bit lacking. And to Are You OK Day's credit, they certainly have enhanced that now, and they're talking about follow through and what happens if you're not okay. So I think right now, currently, they're talking about the right things in terms of support post, if you're not okay. Because I think people just go, Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Okay, good God. We've had that conversation, right? Absolutely. Never talk about it again, but it's what happens if someone's not okay. And I think that's something that Are You OK Day is doing a lot better now in terms of, okay, they've talked about, what happens if someone tells you that they're not okay, about then encouraging them to follow up with getting help and then you following up with them sometime later. They're also now talking about actually reaching out for professional help and trying to tie in support services, which I think is great. Because for me, there's a lot of mental health awareness things going out there at the moment, but still the biggest barrier and the thing I'm most passionate about is there's still stigma around having a problem and then getting help. So I think that's something that Are You OK Day is doing better in terms of, okay, well, the next step is go and see a psychologist, go see a counsellor, go see a doctor, trying to break down the stigma around seeking help, because I'm conscious as a psychologist that that's the thing that gets in the way for people, because there's that many different resources out there and support, as you said, some of it better than others. But if you're looking and you're willing to open your mind and go out and get help, you will get it, but you may just have to keep looking for a little while and researching and trying to, a few things hit and miss. But if you have the courage to keep working, like everyone finds, eventually you'll crack it and you'll find the person that's right for you.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we've come to at the moment. I've said it before, I think, in my interviews with people, when people have asked me my own personal opinion, taking off my Mr. Perfect hat. It's not a controversial one, but it's one that I am a cynic. I say skeptical is a better word. I'm a skeptic anyway about some things, and more so that because I've been through it, I've seen the journey. I kind of found my own way by pure just having to just not ask. I didn't ask for help for a long time. That's why I tell people now, don't do what I did. Don't wait till 30 to get to a crisis point before you. And I was pushed straight. Unfortunately, it worked its way in the end because I got to try a lot of things, but I was pushed kind of straight towards the crisis end and not given the options or education about other things available. Yeah. And what's kind of happened over these past probably 5 years, the acceleration of great awareness, great acceptance that a lot of us are struggling or do struggle at different frequencies, different levels for different reasons. I think it's fantastic. A lot of niche support services that are clinical, non-clinical, you name it. However, I feel like we're in this no man's land a little bit. So we've moved everyone, not everyone, but we've moved a good proportion of the population or people to this consciousness that, yes, it's fine now to say, shit, I'm struggling. Put your hand up, But and a good chunk of these people in the middle have moved on again to go, I'm accessing some proactive help. I've tried this. I've tried holistic things, clinical things, you name it. I'm doing all these things, and I'm active in a mental health group, whatever it might be. But it's still we're in this middle stage, I feel. I don't know if there is an end point, but I also feel it's a generational thing of this is another 10 years, of hard work before you move it to be a normal thing that you would naturally go, I'm just going to see my counselor today. I'm going to ring this person. I'm going to go and do my meditation. I go and do my football, my kick around, my exercise, my blah, 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 blah. And you piece together all those pieces, because I talk about when people have asked me, they assume not well, go to doctor, psychologist, specialist, end of. And I say, no. And my psychologist tells me, he's just a bit of my puzzle. He's a really vital bit and it's important, but it's just a bit of the puzzle. So I have to navigate those other things as well. I have to look at those other resources, and I wonder for me, and I don't know your opinion on this, it's almost we've moved everyone to this point, or moving a lot of people into the middle point of, we've kind of answered, maybe we're not okay. But how do we communicate it in a way that's simple and not overwhelming? Because I actually feel people say, I didn't know about this support group. I didn't know about Mr. Perfect. I didn't know about it. I'm when I've mapped it out, I've gone, geez, there's tons of support, ridiculous amounts of support all over the country, be it clinically, be it non-clinically, be it whatever. So what is the problem? Is it the communication of are people confused where to go, or are they don't know which step they should take next? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, I don't know your opinion on that, but that's where I feel we're at, which is incredible. We've moved, but now there's an opportunity to move further. Yeah.
No, you're right. Absolutely. I agree, Terry. There is an option to move further. And there's a whole heap of things, that the whole fear around, now I've admitted I've got a problem, what do I do now? And then it's overwhelming because there's so many different options. You're right. There's this whole thing going on around getting help that you're right. It's not necessarily about lack of resources. Sometimes it could be too many resources, and then everyone having an opinion on what you should do. And then there's that further confusion, Terry. So you're right. It is becoming something that people, once they identify they need help or want to get help, then it's a minefield in itself in terms of reaching out. So if you've got any tips or hints on how to simplify the process in terms of getting help, please let me know, because I'll be all over that, mate. But I think it's just a matter of, once you put your hand up, having the courage then to do your own research and doing what you think works for you, no matter what it is, whether it's online, whether you say clinical, non-clinical, the Mr. Perfect barbecues, or coming to see someone like myself, whatever it might be. just having the courage to do your own research and keep looking until you find what you need. I think that's the key. Don't stop until you find what you need.
I like it, yeah, and it's not it's definitely not a negative thing to say. Like, people might think, oh yeah, like, I've put my hand up and then now no one's going to help me, but I know for a fact there's an unbelievable amount of resources and support out there. But distilling it is going to have to. You have to put in some work yourself as well. If you're capable and you're mentally capable at that point to do it, hopefully you're not at a crisis point where you are not capable. So, and a utopia for me is when people say, what's kind of Mr. Perfect? I say, well, we're down here, we're the soft entry, right? I put us in that informal sector at the beginning of the trail. Yeah. Of course, we are open to anyone to come along, but in 10 years' time, if we're still running, I want 99% of the people coming to us, they're on that first stage of, okay, things were good, and now they're not so good, and I'm not 100% sure why, so I'm going to test this out. I'm going to go here and just find out a little bit more, and then I'm going to, go and join that football team I said I was going to do. I'm going to socialize here more. I might try and they'll piece together that, and hopefully they never get to move up that scale to crisis. That's my utopia. But I feel at the moment that's going to take a lot of generational change, because we get people coming at us from the crisis point to the first stage to the just curious, or they might already access help. So I'm curious to see the next few years and where that will lead. But what's your hopes for the way we access help, I guess? How can we move it forward from here, do you think?
Oh, look, I think it's a matter of, there's got to be some policy changes, to be frank, Terry. It's probably some back end stuff that's got to be done. I mean, even accessing psychologists in private practice on a self-charge fee, so that can be a barrier. The mental health care plans, that process around that, rebates, there's all those genuine barriers that get in the way. And then if you do go and access services that tend to do bulk billing or free services, you could be waiting months and months on end. So unfortunately, it's one of those things where there's got to be some policy shifts and changes. Look, to be honest, psychology is not exactly a sexy industry to get into. So anyone that's sort of looking for that, I don't know how to describe it. Do you know what I mean? Like, say, you're not going to exactly get billions of people that want to get into the psychology industry in itself. So that's a challenge. So how we sort of navigate that is something that's got to be done. But like I said, I was thinking about people having the courage to do the research and to reach out for help. You put your hand up and acknowledge it. You will get help, as you said. I don't think there's many people. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I still think there's a lot of people out there that still may demonize you for reaching out for help. But I think in the next 10 years that will change, because kids are more aware of it, and obviously they're the next generation. And so I think in that space it will change. And then once it's more socially acceptable to reach out for help, then I think that'll be the thing where we need to have it more accessible in terms of services, whether that's, more psychologists on the ground somehow, or better access to rebates, or ease of access, those sort of things, Terry. I think there's a few things that go into it. But essentially, as you've identified, if you have the mental faculty resources to do your research, please make sure you are. Please make sure you're digging around, you're finding what you need, feel comfortable and feel positive that you can actually influence who you see and how they help you.
Love that. No, that's it. And I think if there's any advice I could give, that is it. I don't give any clinical stuff. I don't do any of that stuff. I almost did that in the past, and it doesn't lead you down a wrong path. There's so many different options for everyone and different stages. But if there's any advice that I could leave, you just summed up very nicely. Do a lot of good research and find what's good for you, because the hopeful thing and the optimistic thing is we're all a lot more conscious of it, and there is a lot of help out there, like a huge amount. Yes, some policy changes might be 100% needed, but it's heartening to know there's people like you out there, mate, doing what you do and are so passionate about it. You can feel it, which is nice. So
thanks, man. I appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. And look, we normally finish up by asking how can people find out about you or anything you're doing? Do you want to plug anything, website, etc.? You fire away.
Well, I think we did have a discussion about you coming on my podcast, mate. So we're going to have to guilt you into it online here. Say, right, Terry's committed to coming on my podcast. I don't know if you remember, I've got an old Chapter 180B that I drive around in. So I'm going to get you in the passenger seat, mate. Go for a drive.
That'd be amazing.
So that's
That'd
what
be
I'm trying to do, like you, just trying to demystify it. And so I've got my own podcast. It's called the Tune Up Podcast. So we're on Facebook and YouTube, so you can check that out.
Excellent.
Endeavour Wellness is the practice name. I'm based down south in Sydney, as I said, but we've also got a practice in Western Sydney, Blacktown, so people can access us there. Obviously, at the moment, we're doing a little bit of telehealth, so that's certainly increased our reach in terms of it doesn't just have to be people that are close to where we're located. We can certainly get access to people a bit more remotely. So telehealth is an option. But yeah, if anyone's looking for us, endeavourwellness.com.au, you can check out our website. As I said, I put a little asterisk in there saying, this is general advice and certainly not my style is going to be for everyone. But look, if you're looking for someone that's happy to give you an honest sort of feedback in terms of where you're at, then I could be your man. But if that's probably a little bit too much for you, then I'll tone it down as best I can. But eventually, we get it.
I love it. No. You want to get the work done. I like it. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Look, I'll share all those links and stuff in the comments after, and tomorrow I'll post this up for everyone to see anyway. So look, absolute pleasure. Really good chatting with you in more depth again. And as I said, can't wait to come on to your podcast, get in that car, and we can have a good chat as well.
Awesome. Thanks very much,
mate. No, take care, buddy. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, mate. See ya.